On Sunday afternoon, I sat on some rocks by the sea for a little while. Beautiful afternoon. It was like being on a Greek island, but not quite as warm, and the sea not quite as inviting, but beautiful. It really is a paradise that we live in. We, all of us, humans, a paradise. And I fell to thinking, and as thinking so often can do, it darkened the edges of the paradise. There's a war going on in Ukraine, unbearable violence committed by the oligarchs of Moscow against that country. All around the world, politicians trying to get their grubby little fingers on power by demonizing refugees and other desperate people, kicking down at some of the most desperate people on earth. And of course, looming over all of it, the mass extinction of creatures and plant life that we humans are causing in this paradise. Koalas endangered, the Great Barrier Reef endangered, so many other species. Literally, we have left them nowhere to live. And sitting there, it's very easy. I could feel the twin temptations of despair or fury. Both are understandable, but neither in the end are useful. Towards the end of his truly brilliant book, The Web of Meaning, Jeremy Lent describes an experiment he did, itself based on an experiment some scientists had done investigating avalanches. He built a pyramid of dried rice grains, dropping grain after grain on top of the pyramid to see what happened as each subsequent grain was dropped on. And he describes how many grains fall with no discernible effect. A few cause a slight shifting of a few grains around them. Some grains cause a little avalanche. Some grains cause a huge avalanche. And many grains, you drop it here, but down here there's a slight shifting in the pyramid. Everything is affected in some tiny way by each new grain being dropped in. And so between the twin attractions of fury and despair, I think of small acts of the best goodness I can manage. Picking up some litter or talking to a neighbor or being there for someone online who needs to talk or whatever. Any act that I can do. And it feels so useless. If I'm good to someone, there will still be the extinction of species. There will still be the war in Ukraine. But this is what I love about Jeremy Lent's book. It helped me understand that every single good act creates the conditions, contributes to the conditions for big good acts. Maybe you do something and it affects nobody except yourself, but it encourages you to be more grateful or generous. Perhaps it affects only the person you do it for. Perhaps it affects the person you do it for, or the creature you do it for, and a few other creatures around it. Perhaps you do a good act and somewhere else unknown to you, there's a ripple effect. Perhaps you will do a good act and it will cause a little earthquake. Greta Thunberg caused a small earthquake. Others have, of course. They haven't yet changed the world, but they have shifted the landscape. She didn't do it alone. Many who came before her created the conditions which enabled her small act to cause an earthquake, avalanche, not an earthquake, an avalanche. This seems to be the best that we can do. I'm not going to be able to change the world, though God knows it needs changing. But perhaps each small act that I can do of caring for this paradise I live in, of caring for others who need caring, of being there for friends and community. Perhaps each small act creates, just in a tiny way, the conditions that someone somewhere will come along and do something that will cause the avalanche that will wipe away this rotten system, this system that allows oil company executives and their hired prostitutes, demeaning the idea of a prostitute there. They're hired hands from the PR industry, and the politicians who they've bought allows them to lie for 30, 40 years about the reality of climate change, and therefore cause genocide for the sake of enriching themselves and their shareholders. I cannot cause them to face the retribution they deserve, and perhaps in the end it doesn't matter. But with each small action, perhaps I and you can create the conditions for a better, more caring, more environmentally sustainable world to come into existence. Is it enough? No. Is it all I can do? Yes. Therefore, is it enough? It must be. Have a good Monday.